Almost there. Chapter 37, Tiana. An excited buzz hammered through Tiana's entire body as their boat's bow cut through the murky swamp water, fevered anticipation building up in her bloodstream. They were close. She could feel it. She spotted a weirdly shaped cypress tree a few minutes earlier and instantly recognized it as one she'd seen the last time she was there. Mama Odie's house would appear soon. Just a few more minutes and they would see it. She paddled with renewed vigor now that they were so close to their destination. Yet despite her excitement, Tiana could not fend off the trepidation that tingled at the back of her neck at the thought of approaching Mama Odie for help once again. She was intimidated by the quirky voodoo lady who talked in riddles and kept a snake as a pet, the one who'd always seemed to know exactly what she was thinking. But she has a good heart. The reminder assuaged a bit of her worry. Mama Odie had been willing to help both Tiana and Naveen the year before. Hopefully, she'd be willing to do it again. Please, please, please. The strangeness of having to rely on someone else for help struck Tiana anew. She knew she was independent to a fault. She had lost count of how many times she had wasted hours, sometimes even days, toiling away at some task or another, refusing to ask for help. But Tiana would not pretend that she could get out of this mess with Facilier on her own. "I don't think my arms can take much more of this," Charlotte cried. "Just a little further, Lottie," Tiana said. "Are you sure?" Charlotte asked. "I am, I promise. It should be right—" She started, but Naveen cut her off. "There it is!" Tiana's eyes grew wide as the boat broke through the curtain of moss that hung like a delicate lace from the spindly branches of two trees. There in the middle of the swamp grew the biggest tree Tiana had ever seen. Hundreds of steps were carved into its massive trunk. They wound their way up to the rickety fishing boat that sat nestled between a cluster of gnarly branches. "Yes," Tiana said. It took all she had not to cry tears of joy. "That's not a house," Charlotte said. "That's a shipwreck. It looks as if it was blown here by a hurricane." Tiana wouldn't have been surprised if that was exactly how Mama Odie had come to reside in that tree. "There's a lot more to that little boat than meets the eye," she told Charlotte. "Everything is going to be okay now. Just watch. Mama Odie will know what to do about the Shadow Man." They paddled up to the humongous cypress tree. Tiana lifted the heavy rope from the boat and tossed it over a chunky tree stump near the base of the tree. Once she'd secured their boat, she plunked her hands on her hips and released a deep, satisfied breath. "Well, we made it," she said. A sense of foreboding sneaked its way into her head, but she tamped it down. There was no reason for her to be afraid. She gingerly climbed up to the boat, doing her best to find a perch on the tree's lumpy roots that protruded from the water. "Is that safe?" Charlotte asked. "Of course it is." She reached a hand out to help Charlotte. "Come on." Her foot slipped, and she had to fight to keep her balance. I think I'm going to stay on the boat," Charlotte said. A moment later, a huge bug zigzagged around her head. She yelped and scrambled out of the boat. "On the other hand, maybe I should join you." "Ah, this brings back memories," Louis said, as he hefted his huge body off the starboard side. "Yes, it does," Naveen said, climbing out after Louis. Once out of the boat, he stopped with his fists perched on his hips and looked around. "Why does it bring back memories?" "Oh, well, you know," Tiana hedged as she started up the steps. "You're probably remembering some other house in the swamp that you visited. Once you visited one swamp house, you visited them all." "But I've never—" "We'd better get up there now," Tiana interrupted. The carved steps squeaked loudly in the quiet bayou. So loudly Tiana wondered if it wasn't by design. It was an ingenious way to alert whoever was in the house that someone was on their way to the steps. "You're going too fast, Tia," Charlotte called. "Yeah, I'm gonna take it slow," Louis puffed. Tiana looked back to make sure they both were okay, then continued up the steps. She was ready to make her case to Mama Odie and hopefully gain the old lady's help. Despite her excitement, she slowed as she approached the door to the boathouse. The rusty hinges looked as if they were ready to fall off. "Who's there?" An unfamiliar voice called from the other side of the door. Tiana jumped. "Mama Odie?" The door opened a few inches, and the sliver of a face appeared through the slit. "I said, who's there?" It opened a little more. Tiana couldn't make out any of the features, not with the way the person stood in the shadow of the doorway, but she could tell by the shape that this was not Mama Odie. Could they be at the wrong house? No, this is definitely the house. Weren't any other old fishing boats sitting in the cypress tree around these parts? I came to see Mama Odie, Tiana said. The door opened a bit wider, and a young woman walked into the dim sunlight. Her golden brown skin was several shades lighter than Tiana's, and she had a red and black checkered kerchief tied around her head. Her eyes were a color Tiana had never seen before, a mixture of green and hazel and gray. She was strikingly pretty. She's not here, the young woman said. It felt as if someone had struck Tiana directly on the chest. She shook her head, unwilling to let the words sink in. There was no way she had gone through all of this trouble only for Mama Odie to not be here. What do you mean she's not here? Tiana asked. She has to be here. This is her home. I know this is her home, the girl said, but she's not here. Auntie Odie is in New Iberia, visiting her sister. My mama, Clary? No, Tiana whispered. This was the one thing she had not considered. She took a step back, as if she could physically distance herself from the sad news. If not for Naveen catching her by the arm, she would have fallen off the steep wooden step. What happened to you? The girl at the door asked, jutting her chin toward Naveen's hand. I came out on the losing end of a fight with an angry tree branch, he said. He cut it on a log while trying to dislodge our boat from some brambles, Tiana murmured, her mind still reeling. It don't look good, the girl said. The way it's puffed up like that means infection is setting in. She looked them both up and down, her face a mask of distrust. But then she backed into the house and held the door open. Come on in. Both Tiana and Naveen remained outside. Well, come on, the girl said. You need to get some salve on that hand before you lose it. I'll whip up something. She tilted her head, indicating that they were to follow her. Once they were alone, Tiana looked to Naveen. What do you think? She whispered. I am a bit frightened, he admitted. But my hand, it hurts like... What was that you said? The Dickens? Tiana sighed. I guess we should go in. You need to let her see about it. She can't do any more damage. The moment they entered the house, Naveen's footsteps halted. He stood just past the entryway, his eyes taking in every nook and cranny of the room. I've been here before, he said. Tiana frowned. She wasn't sure what was happening. Naveen wasn't supposed to have any recollection of anything that happened during their time as frogs, but ever since they'd taken off on the bayou, Tiana could tell the memories were beginning to return. She released a nervous laugh. Don't be ridiculous. No, I have, Naveen insisted. I don't know when, but I've been here. He rubbed his chin with his fingers. There was a snake. It was a peculiar snake. He put a hand to his head. It makes no sense, but I know it's true. Just then the girl returned. She held several colorful glass jars and bottles against her chest. Come on in the kitchen, she said. I'm Lizette, by the way. She threw out over her shoulder. I'm Tiana, and this here is Naveen. My friends Lottie and Louie are still making their way up the staircase. Navigating those stairs takes a little getting used to, Lizette said. Tiana followed her into the room where she'd helped Mama Odie whip up a pot of gumbo the last time she had been in this house. She held her breath, waiting for Naveen to mention how familiar this room was too, but he was uncharacteristically quiet. There was a large mortar and pestle sitting on the table. The bowl's smooth interior was scored with marks, likely from years of use. So what is it your folks want with Auntie Odie? Lizette asked. If you need her to put a spell on someone, I'll tell you now that she don't use her knowledge for stuff like that. No, it's not it at all, Tiana said. I've been here before, and Mama Odie lent her assistance. I was hoping she'd be willing to do it again. You see, I've gotten myself into a bit of a situation. She wondered how much she should divulge, but what more was there to lose? Tiana leaned a little closer and said, I got involved with a voodoo man back in New Orleans. Lizette's eyes light up. Oh, y'all call from New Orleans? I love it there. Tiana thought for a moment. If this young woman was related to Mama Odie, we really could use some help, but since Mama Odie isn't here, maybe you... I can't do what Mama Odie can, the young woman simply said. That's not my gift. But, hey, Mama Odie, Louis's overexcited voice interrupted her. He lumbered inside, Charlotte trailing behind him out of breath. "You not Mama Odie," he said, looking at Tiana and hooking a thumb over Lizette. "Who's this?" "Mama Odie is visiting family out of town," Tiana explained. She couldn't stop her shoulders from wilting with disappointment. She wondered if she could wait for the older woman's return. Charlotte swooped gracefully into a wicker chair as Tiana moved closer to the table, watching Lizette add several leaves and berries to the martyr. Tiana was struck by the girl's efficiency and how competent she appeared to be as measured each ingredient. Her baby-soft skin made her look so young. She couldn't have been more than 15 years old. She uncorked a slim bottle, but unlike those Tiana had spotted in Fasilier's workshop, the moment the cork was out, a putrid smell rose from the container. Faldanza, Naveen said, waving his uninjured hand in front of his nose. It's the valerian root, Lizette said. It has a foul odor, but it'll soothe the sting while the ribwort fights the infection. She sprinkled several of the fragrant leaves into the mortar, then used the pestle to grind it all into a dark green paste. If you don't mind my asking, how'd you learn to do this? Tiana asked. My mama taught me, Lizette said. She's an herbalist, too. I'm still an apprentice, but there's nothing complicated about making a salve to stop infection. Your mama and Mama Odie are sisters? Auntie Odie is my mama's older sister. I come to take care of Auntie's house while she visits Mama. She left a few days ago, but she'll be back in about a month's time. A month? Tiana said. That's way too long. She studied Lizette's face. Are you sure you don't have any of Mama Odie's special powers? Lizette rolled her eyes. They're not special powers, she lamented. Do you know anything about voodoo? Not really, Tiana admitted. I just know that the Shadow Man is causing some awful things to happen around the city with it, and I know that Mama Odie used her gifts to help me last year. I don't know what the Shadow Man is all about, but sounds to me like whatever he's involved in is a lot different from what Mama Odie and the rest of my family practices. We call on the Lewa, the spirits of our ancestors that offer healing and protection from harm. It's used for good, not for evil. Well, that's exactly what I need, Tiana said. Well, unless you can make it to New Iberia to fetch Auntie Odie, you'll have to wait. And even if you went there to fetch her, I don't think she'll come back here until she's done with her visit. She still treats Mama like a little girl, spoiling her rotten. Lizette stuck her fingers in the concoction she made and rubbed the paste between her thumb and forefinger. She brought it to her nose and sniffed, not reacting at all to the pungent aroma. I think this will do. Send your boyfriend over here, she said to Tiana. He's not my boyfriend, Tiana stammered, her face growing hot. The young girl's brow arched in a way that told Tiana she was not fooling her one bit. Lizette took Naveen's injured hand in her own and slathered a thick layer of the grainy salve over it. Naveen pinched his face, but as more of the salve went on, his expression turned from one of concern to relief. Feel better? Tiana asked him. Yes, it does, he said, a bit of wonder in his voice. It does. I have a scrape from what I felt when I fell getting out of the boat, Charlotte said. Is there a chance I could get some of that smelly green stuff too? As soon as I'm done with this one here, I'll take care of yours, Lizette said. She lifted a square of cloth from the table and ripped it down the middle, then tore it several more times until there were 6 narrow strips of fabric. She gently but efficiently wrapped 4 strips of cloth around Naveen's injured hand. Once she got to the end, she reached under the kerchief, covering her hand, pulled out a hairpin, and used it to secure the dressing. Wow, Naveen said, holding his wrist back and forth as he stared at his hand. This is impressive, he said. He looked up at Lizette and smiled. I am very impressed. It is impressive, Tiana said. That's a great skill. Lizette shrugged her shoulders as if making a concoction that would save Naveen from possibly losing his hand wasn't a big deal. We all have our part to play in this world, she said. Being an herbalist is mine. She brought the mortar over to Charlotte and rubbed some of the salve on Lonnie's tiny scrape. It won't take long for this one to heal. I'll jar some of this up so you can take it back with you. Take it with them? It suddenly occurred to Tiana that she would be on her way back to New Orleans without Mama Odie's help. Without anyone's help. She was on her own, and it was becoming increasingly evident in way over her head.